Thank you all for joining us today. We'll go ahead and get started in just a couple minutes here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here today. For those of you joining, you're in the right spot. If you're here for the webinar with Lytics on how to mitigate merge conflicts with self-healing identity management. Welcome and thank you all for joining. I'm Stephanie. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Lytics and your moderator for today. As I mentioned, the theme of today's webinar is identity resolution, and we'll spend the next 30 minutes or so diving into that. If you have any questions as we're running through this webinar, please go ahead and add them to the Q&A section in the Zoom. I'll do my best to watch questions as they come in, but if I miss anything, we'll be certain to answer those at the end of our time today. In today's digital world, consumers interact with businesses across multiple channels. This makes it challenging for businesses to keep track of their customers and to build accurate and persistent customer profiles. With Lytics, you can seamlessly integrate and analyze customer data from various sources, enabling you to understand and engage with your audience more effectively. These profiles are incredibly advanced and require very little setup or maintenance. By harnessing the power of machine learning, Lytics profiles provide real-time insights into customer engagement, interactions, and content preferences, derived from a combination of customer data and behavioral analysis. They are specifically designed to overcome common challenges such as handling large amounts of data, tackling customer attrition, ensuring compliance with regulations, and managing complex identification strategies. With Lytics profiles, marketers can effortlessly create, manage, and activate comprehensive customer profiles that are not only relevant and accurate, but also maintain their integrity over time. The best part is you don't need extensive technical expertise to make the most of this cutting-edge solution. Lytics handles the heavy lifting, allowing you to focus on driving impactful marketing outcomes. But more on this later. For now, let me introduce you to today's experts. Today, I'm joined by Kelsey Abeg and Sean McMahon. Kelsey, will you share a brief introduction to yourself?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Kelsey Abeg. I'm a senior product manager at Lytics, and I specialize in our ID resolution solution.
Thanks, Kelsey. No, go ahead. Sorry, Sean.
That's okay. Sean McMahon here, a manager of professional services and implementation, work in the customer success division. I've been here for close to 6 years now, mostly working as a solutions architect in that capacity.
Thank you, Sean. All right, so let's dive in. So growing investments in identity management reflect the importance of this process. We're also seeing more awareness among brands of identity resolution as an essential part of their foundation for customer experience excellence, likely why you're all here with us today. We know that this year spending will surpass 10.4 billion, jumping 3.5 times what it was in 2018. That means that today, the organizations not yet investing in identity management solutions are slated to fall even further behind in the race toward customer centricity. But even among brands who have invested in identity management tooling, it's not exactly smooth sailing. So to dive in, Sean, will you speak to some of the most common challenges that businesses face when it comes to identity resolution?
Yeah, some of those common challenges have to do with tech stack differences, disparate systems, such as different data warehouses, databases in general, walled garden approaches. So you have a lot of legacy data that has like weak identifiers that cannot connect to a strong ID. So it's sometimes challenging to get that global view of how customers traverse the funnel or the journey throughout the different touch points.
Thank you, Sean. And Kelsey, from your point of view, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd add just a little bit of context around privacy as well and compliance. As time continues on, first-party data is becoming more and more important from an investment perspective. And so it's been really important for customers to have a higher input on their current privacy around their data control as well, and then managing consent. So it's just keeping that in mind and being able to track your users so that you can continue to keep track of that as well has become super important.
Absolutely. And for businesses who are getting it right, how does identity resolution improve their customer experience?
Sure. Yeah. Good ID resolution means two things. It means that your profile is healthy and it means your profile is accurate. And that's over time, right? So as you continue to bring in more data and more information onto your consumer profiles, that gives it more opportunity to bloat, to become inaccurate, especially depending on how you're matching on that information, right? But a good ID res strategy will keep all that information in mind and be dynamic enough and flexible enough to respond in a way that outputs a profile that continues to stay healthy and continues to stay accurate and relevant over time. And right, when we have a more accurate profile, we have better campaign performance because it means that the insights that we're appending to the profile actually have to do with the profile at hand, right? The consumer that we're tracking. And if we're able to append correct information, then the insights, the ML, the AI that we build on top of that profile are correct as well, which means that predictive audiences, right, lookalikes, experiments all become more accurate, and therefore the result will be better.
Great. So I hear complex tech stack resulting in weak identifiers across profiles and data privacy as some challenges to overcome. And that when done right, accurate profiles can result in stronger campaign performance. So now the question is, how do businesses master this? So looking to you, Sean, will you speak to some of the most effective methods for identity resolution?
Yeah, so some of those effective methods are around like a hybrid model with a deterministic and probabilistic matching on those profiles. So if you want to think of like deterministic as like more of like the determined idea of I have an email address or a phone number that I want to match on. I know that I want to match these from different channels or different data warehouses from an email service provider and a data warehouse, versus probabilistic, where it's a probability, it's an algorithm. It's technically fuzzy matching in that regard, where it's going to be more broad for the reach. So a hybrid of both of these is really great because you can look at it from like a top of the funnel approach with probabilistic, where you're trying to gain more reach, versus actually going into the funnel and later on in the funnel as you're trying to create that conversion. You want to have more detailed approach on that profile, which you'll want to have like a deterministic approach where you want that accuracy. You want to know for a fact that like this profile is going to have this sort of data in this kind of identity resolution pattern.
Great. And can you then explain how Lytics collects and analyzes data from various sources to create unified customer profiles?
Yeah, so Lytics is ID agnostic, where we can take in a multitude of different identifiers. So whether it be a email address or a web cookie or a phone number or an account ID, we can take in those types of identifiers. So there's really two specific types where we have like bridge identifiers and origin generated IDs. So bridge identifiers, if you want to think of it bridging different streams of data. So if you have an email address, for example, that is in an email service provider, CRM, and you want to bridge that with a data warehouse, you can do that with that kind of bridge identifier versus the origin generated IDs, which are more of like a cookie ID. The responsibility of a cookie ID is somewhat ephemeral. So it's like it's anonymous, but it's great for creating that anonymous profile in the beginning. But it might not be super helpful in bridging more than one stream of data, such as like a web web stream versus a data warehouse stream.
Got it. Thank you, Sean. And Kelsey, earlier on, you mentioned data privacy and security as being important. How does Lytics ensure the security and privacy of customer data during the identity resolution process?
Yeah, sure. So there's two different facets to security around profile management. The first is going to be that we're able to manage things like consent on a profile at any given time. And obviously, right, consent and GDPR management for that consent. And the way that we're able to do that accurately, and I sort of hinted at this above, and we'll speak a little bit more in depth in a few minutes about this topic, is our ability to make sure that the profile stays healthy over time with ML that we weaved into our graph intelligence, right? So what that allows us to do is make sure that when new opt-in statuses come in from wherever they come in, we're able to merge it to the correct profile, and we're able to make sure that profile stays healthy, that it doesn't get too large due to bloat, right, where it can no longer be managed, or it gets to a state where it can't be modified or updated, or even potentially, right, you stitch the wrong information to a profile. We do a lot of education around that on how to make sure that doesn't happen, but it's also just naturally how our graph is inclined to behave. So that's sort of the first part. The second is going to be more around the mechanics that we have built into our platform and the features that allow our customers to feel safe around how their data is being managed. The first is going to be within our LQL layer. LQL is Lytics query language. It's a transformation language that we apply against all of our incoming data. What it allows us to do is hash and encode any strings that our customers feel like they want to in our UI, right? Whether that's PII, whether that's sensitive fields they don't want exposed. And so it can automatically hash any incoming data real time onto profiles or encode them so that when they're sent downstream or viewed in the UI, they're encoded and protected, right? So that's sort of piece one. The second is going to be an opportunity for them to hide PII from view in the UI if they so choose. So we have settings that can manage that, right? And then finally, just the holistic way in which we manage data privacy is that we never pass or pull in data unless explicitly told to do so, right? And this is one of the more sensitive integrations that we work with where this is important is client side, right? Because that is publicly accessible. It's important that you don't surface anything that could expose fields that we don't want to, right? And so the opportunity to hash that data, the opportunity to control exactly what's showing client side, what gets surfaced, what audiences show, what features and attributes show, gives even more control to our customers on protecting that consumer data.
Great. And changing pace a little bit, thinking of AI, can you talk a little bit about what role AI plays in Lytics ID res capabilities, how it can enhance efficiency of the process? Yeah,
definitely. So it's super important, as I've mentioned, and weave throughout, which is a great segue, super important that our profiles stay healthy and accurate over time. It's not just that we set up ID resolution in the beginning, right? And we can prove out that the right data is merging the profiles, that we're stitching and building the profiles correctly. That's really just step one, right? What's important for us is the longevity of that profile. What we found over the last decade and change during implementations about our profiles is that the most active profiles are actually the ones that are going to be exposed to the most thrash or friction later on in their consumer journeys, because they're usually the ones that accrue the most data. And the ones that accrue the most data in most platforms are usually ones that hit, let's call them platform limits first, right? And platform limits are due to usually size on the graph, the size of the entity. Most systems have them in place, right? They're protective because you can't have an infinite system. But what our solution allows you to do is not worry about that, not worry about bloat on profiles, right? And that we can continue to compact down our consumer profiles where we mitigate for data loss is that there isn't any, and that we continue to show relevant information on the profile, but we intelligently compact our profiles based off the strength of the identifiers themselves and the expiration of said identifiers, right? Especially around those weaker ones that show up a lot and build out graphs very quickly. So that's sort of one capacity. The other is around, so that's keeping profiles healthy over time. The other is going to be around how we manage edge cases to ID resolution. What we've learned also over time is that there's always going to be edge cases and outliers to ID resolution strategies. We can say that a person should have one email. We can say that a person should have one customer ID and many cookies, right? That's what we expect across our MarTech stack. That's what we've assigned. But in reality, it's never true across all of your consumers. There's always consumers that do something different, that surprise you, that are able to link IDs that you don't think should be linked, right? Especially in the case of, let's say, a single household logs into a single machine, right? And two people are assigned to the same cookie, but they're two different profiles, right? Lytics has the capability to unlink profiles that we don't want linked and to protect against merging profiles as well that aren't merged, right? So let's say we expect that a user should have one customer ID and one email. But what we found over time is that there are some custom incidences in a data warehouse where a customer gets two customer IDs, right? Something got deleted. There's a legacy system that had to get brought in, right? There's always edge cases to that. And you should be able to build an ID resolution solution that allows to flex around those edge cases. And that's what we've done in our graph, is we've built it in a way that's intelligent enough to identify patterns in our graph and build out the profiles accurately, even if we're not manually directing it to do so. So essentially, it's an automatic process that's constantly keeping those profiles in a good state. And that's something that will continue over time. So as your profiles build out, as your consumers become more enriched, we can feel ensured that those profiles are going to stay accurate, right? Which is the goal, is that they stay accurate for campaign performance, for privacy, for consent. All of that proves down to be super important for the state of the profiles. So that's how Lytics has been taking AI and weaving it in. And as we'll continue to build in more intelligent processes, that is going to continue to be our goal, is to make it easier to keep the profile healthy without having to intervene.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. All right, so we just covered a great deal about solutions. So now what about identity resolution in practice? Looking to you, Sean, can you tell me about a success story that highlights measurable impact Lytics has had on a business's ID res strategy?
Yeah, there is one that was really great. Kelsey just kind of talked a lot about what we did to get them to success, where we had a customer that had issues with over merging with account ID structures. Basically, the idea was for us to go in there and do an analysis, see the patterns, understand those patterns that were causing the issue with the different account IDs versus the emails versus the web cookies, and then create a more robust rule system that allowed those to unlink from each other and to create, in some cases, a one-to-many process. So having one account per person. So if they do change their email address, they have that option. So we were able to really, over the course of a couple weeks, come to a resolution, and they're able to have a healthy client, healthy account right now.
Great, thank you. All right, so that brings us to the end of the topics that we had prepped. I wanted to save a couple extra minutes here for any questions that you all in the audience might have. I do have, just as a reminder, if you have any questions you'd like to ask, go ahead and drop those in the Q&A in the Zoom. I do have one right off the bat here. How can businesses ensure that they are collecting and using customer data in a compliant and privacy-friendly way, even when using a solution like Lytics?
Yeah, there's a couple ways. We have the ability to create multiple attributes inside of Lytics. So as you get signals, whether it's through a OneTrust system or some other system that is going to be controlling governance, compliance, we can take those attributes and add them to profiles to make sure that we're opting in, we're allow listing people into specific segmentation so that they are given the privacy and the flexibility as far as Lytics is concerned to send that information downstream wherever it needs to go, whether it's ad campaigns or email correspondence.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah.
I have one more coming in as well. The question here is, what's the most common mistake companies tend to make with their ID resolution approaches?
Sure. Yeah, I can start with that one. So it depends on sort of the structure of the business, right? If they're small or large, but let's assume, right, the average mistakes that we usually find that people make in their ID res strategy is they try to over solution it. In that what they'll try to do is think of every single scenario that could occur and try to resolve that, right, in a single instance. This usually happens in their data warehouse, right, where they have many complex rules around how their profiles can merge and how their profiles can stitch. And this is sometimes the first time we really think about it at a global perspective when we're working with them, right? And so when we get their solution, you can see that they try to plan around every edge case. And what we try to teach our customers right off the bat, right, is that no solution is going to be perfect. You can't build a solution around an unpredictable entity like a consumer and expect them to always fall into that case, right? So what we try to teach them is it's important to focus on your majority initially, right? Is that what are a majority of your consumers doing? How can we track that majority? And by doing that, by focusing on the majority set, right, we can usually get a pretty basic set or simpler set of identity rules that allow us to apply something and then see how the consumers behave around that rule set. And so it's just teaching them to start simple and not try to overcomplicate the process, because sometimes, right, the technical debt that you put in place to keep track of, the 300 consumers out of 20 million that may behave in a certain way, isn't sometimes worth the technical debt you're taking on to do that, right? And that we can help build out a solution to help cover for those in the future, but focusing on the majority right now will get you that return quicker. And then we can focus on, let's say, what we call the edge cases. So it's a process, right, that takes a little bit of time and evolution, and that you always want to focus on the majority and not the minority to build your rule set, which is a common rule, right? That doesn't just apply to ID res, but we seem to find the over solutioning occurring quite often. The second mistake that we see our consumers make is that they sometimes miss connections in their ID res solution, right? A lot of the times it's breaking it down and saying, okay, well, here are all the pieces of technology you have in your tech stack. Here's the ID resolution you think is working. And then you start to apply some logic to that and say, okay, well, what happens when you try this method? Okay, well, what happens when a person clicks through to here? Are you capturing that as someone who's known now? And you'll find, right, these missing bridges across the ID resolution strategy because the focus hasn't always been on the connections between the systems, right? It's been a more siloed approach. So inserting a tool like Lytics will make that more apparent and make it much easier to correct, right, once we've gotten into a single solution. So once again, those are two of the more common things that we see our customers do before they onboard with us. But there's a plethora, honestly, depending on the size of their architecture and their legacy data.
Sure. I do have a follow-up question for you from that as well. What's a good way to test, assess, evaluate whether your ID res approach is the right one?
Yeah, so I sort of mentioned this when I started the first conversation, the first question, but map it out first and foremost. The important thing is that all of your data on the profile represents all of the technology that that person interacted with, right? And what we want to make sure is that all the bridges are built for that to happen first, because a lot of cases they're not. And a lot of cases we're actually missing connections on profiles to where that profile is not fully built out. And what that can cause is we call them orphaned profiles in our system, which means you have many profiles in Lytics that are actually one person because we aren't able to merge them correctly across those channels, right? And it's just because we didn't know to scope it out. So the important thing, and this is something we work on through every implementation, is just that practice. watch a person or a consumer track through a journey and make sure that as they're hitting those different touch points, that we're able to capture that ID that brings in that touch point that allows you to merge and identify that information. And then the second obvious way to track whether or not your solution is working is to just track those that are converting from unknown to known, right? It doesn't have to be an amazing number at first, especially if you're just sort of identifying this process and just starting. But what you want to see moving forward is a positive slope, an increase on that stitching mechanism, right? Over time, you want to see more people come in, but you also want to see that line go up in a linear way, right? So that means that your ratio of conversion is going up. So it's not just holding flat and saying, okay, well, you're converting about 3% a week. You want to do 3 and then 5 and then 10 and then 15, right? You want to prove that your strategy is evolving over time, and that as you get to know your consumers better in your CDP, you're able to improve upon your velocity of conversion rate in your funnels. So those would be the two primary ways.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelsey.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like a data dictionary is very important to have upfront, firsthand, in understanding not only like the attributes that are coming in for each stream, each data set, but also understanding like having an understanding of like where those identifiers are. Are they a set? Having that discussion up front, understanding if there's going to be multiple collections of that specific one. Is it a true unique identifier? Because I mean, that's a question that you should always be asking yourself: is it a true one? Will it change over time? And these questions are very important up front. So it'll allow us to come up with a very robust strategy. So it's future proof in a sense. The other thing is, from the point of view of having not knowing, or if there's some doubt or uncertainty around an identifier being a unique identifier, that's something that it's always good to dive in with a database. Talk to a data engineer, consult our team, consult your internal teams. Make sure that those identifiers are true, in fact, unique, and if they aren't, that's okay, because it gives you that opportunity to identify something that could be attributing to a larger problem in the future.
Great addition. All right, we are getting to the top of the hour here, so I'm going to go ahead and move us forward and wrap things up here. Just wanted to summarize some of the things that we've discussed today. Identity management can be difficult to manage due to several challenges. We mentioned things like complex tech stacks, countless identifiers, and data privacy concerns. We also mentioned that when you get it right, the rewards are invaluable: improved campaign performance and a strong CX strategy, to name a few. And that Lytics as a solution enables you to seamlessly integrate and analyze customer data from various sources. Our solution is self-healing, ensuring profile accuracy over time, even as data and identifiers change. This is a complex theme. I dropped a link to a really great blog that Kelsey wrote in the chat. There's a short link on the screen here as well. We definitely encourage you to check it out and reach out if you want to continue the conversation around this or anything else Lytics might be of assistance with. So thank you all for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day.